Hi guys, White Warlock here. This is going to be part 3 of me discussing every single support gem that's going to be released in early access on the 6th of December. Now, first off, not all these support gems are fully known yet, as in there are some mechanics that they mention. For example, in Lockdown, I'm just going to grab an example, says causing pin buildup. We have no clue what pinning does. So yeah, some of them are not known yet, and others are still subject to change. Most of this information is from Havoc, who went through every support gem when he recorded his gameplay in LA, which was 3 or 4 weeks ago from now. So a lot could have been changed. So just make sure of that. But I would say that most of the mechanics of the support gems, unless GG decided to completely change them, are still relatively the same. So you can still get some knowledge of them. You can find all of these support gems on poe2db.tw if you want to check them out for yourself. However, I'm just going to talk through each one of them and how you can apply them in your builds as far as we know for now. All right, so our last support gem we discussed in part 2 was Lockdown. So we're going to start with MAME. This just causes MAME on hit. Obviously, we know that MAME on hit is already a thing in Path of Exile 1. So that we like that gives a debuff, a movement speed debuff on the target. Now, I'm gonna assume that MAME is the same in PoE 2, but maybe it's not. So then it might be more useful. Obviously, slowing enemies is not the best thing ever. However, with the ability of grabbing more support gems on your secondary and third and fourth skills is easier, you might be able to fit the main support gem somewhere. And if you can get the 5 extra decks somewhere, or if you already have that deck and it doesn't matter, then maybe you can use it. Obviously, we don't know yet. Maybe it's very easy to get on a ring or on the passive tree, or maybe in your ascendancy. Then MAME obviously matters less. But for now, this is an ability you can use maybe for like an extra small defensive layer in your build. All right, next we have Mana Flare. So this supports any spell that hits enemies, and it causes to trigger a Mana Flare on a critical hit. This Mana Flare does consume mana. How much we don't know, because we just don't have all the numbers yet. But if you critical hit an opponent, an enemy, a monster, you trigger Mana Flare. Once Mana Flare does, we don't know yet. So this one is quite limited. It's just an extra way on critical hit. If it's the same as like explosions or something, then it's a more clear base skill. If it's more single target, then it's obviously much better in against bosses. And maybe you can put it on your main skill or just on something on the support skill or in the secondary skill that does damage all the time. Let's say you can get like a critical hitting secondary skill that triggers Mana Flare a lot, and Mana Flare deals base damage or something that does not rely on the skill that it supports. Then you can just place it on the secondary skill and just free that space up for your main skill and still use this to deal damage. Then we got Mana Leech, that's the next one. So this causes your supported attack that deal physical damage to leech mana. Leech is kind of a little bit different than in PoE 1 and might be more important because the recovery, especially of mana, is going to be way less like plentiful than it is in Path of Exile 1. So Leech might become more important, especially for some builds that don't have easy access to it in their ascendancies or on the tree, it's on the complete different side, for example, then Mana Leech support might be interesting, especially because it's an attack, right? So this is not for spells. It might be interesting on that. And it's also only physical damage attacks, so it's a little bit niche. So I'm not sure if it will be used at all, but maybe. It's also a dex support requirement, which is interesting, that it's not intelligence, but I guess because it's a physical attack damage support, it's better to have it as a dex instead of the +5 int. Then we have many bolts. So this is one of the new crossbow support gems, and what it says is that the supported skill deals 1% more damage for each bolt reloaded in the past 6 seconds. So I'm assuming like this is really good on the attack on the crossbow that's like an assault rifle that has like 30 ammo, and you can put it on there, and then because you reloaded 30 bolts, perhaps if you can reload that very fast, you have just 30% more damage. Obviously, we need to know a little bit on how we can like manage that or how we can build around that. But this seems really good for either your main skill or one of your other bolt attacks that you put in your character. Definitely one of the few ones you are definitely gonna take on your character. They have meat shield, so this is a different minion support again that gives more life, 50% more life to your minions and 35% less damage. So what you can do is you can put this on one of your minions, and then you kill that minion or you cause that minion to die. And let's say, for example, minion instability, which is a different one, which says when it's reduced to low life, it deals 50% of their maximum life as fire damage to surrounding enemies. Well, meat shield, it gives them a lot more maximum life, so that could like synergize with each other. So that might be quite interesting. Otherwise, maybe if you have a minion that really needs to stay alive but doesn't necessarily need to deal damage because it supports you in some way or supports your other minions, then you can use the meat shield. Next one, we have melee physical damage. So melee physical damage is just a more melee physical damage support, but it does have the drawback of granting less attack speed, which is more of a debuff than it would be in Path of Exile 1. It's obviously still a really big downside, but it will most likely still be worth it for most, if not all, physical damage attack builds, because more like 35% more damage is just very good, and you have to find some way to get back at the attack speed. Even though it's harder in Path of Exile 2, I think it's still worth it overall. Then we have minion instability, which talked a little bit about that. So yeah, when they explode, they deal fire damage, and if you can reduce their if you can either reduce their maximum life so they die faster, or you can increase the maximum life and then kill them as soon as possible with different means so that they deal more damage. Those are the two ways you can you can think about that. Then we have minion mastery. This is +1 to level supported minion skills. Let's say you can 6-link one of your minions, and you don't really have that 6th or that 5th support gem. That this is always good. Otherwise, you can put it on your like your 2nd or 3rd tier minion gem just to have it higher levels, because why not? Because there's not that many minion supports, right? Eventually you'll run out, so this one can probably be utilized in every minion build. Then we got Minion Pact, another minion support gem. So this support skill removes 100% of your maximum life from a nearby minion to use 40% more damage. So um, yeah, so you drain the life from one of your minions in order to boost the skill's damage. So you need to have a minion with enough life to drain the full amount. So you need like the minion needs to be big enough for you to have your 100% maximum life. But if you do, then your skill deals 40% more damage. So this is definitely something that the witch will try to utilize, especially early on in the game, where it's very likely that you have less maximum life than your minions. Obviously, let's say you have a CI build where your maximum life is 1, then remove 100% of your maximum life from a nearby minion if that's one, then it's super easy to deal 40% more damage as long as you still have minions, right? Especially if you can keep them alive or they regen. So minion pact is quite interesting. If it works that way, as I said with CI, then I think minion pact will become very strong because 40% more damage is really, really good for spell builds. So this one is definitely something to keep an eye on, especially on witch builds. Next, we have mobility. So this grants the supported skill 20% less damage. However, if you can move while using that skill, you have less of a penalty to use that. So this is for ranged builds mostly because that's a new change where you can use ranged attacks while moving, but you move very slowly. Mobility allows you to move much faster while using that skill. So I'm not sure how useful this will be but obviously there's less mobility in the game than there is in Path of Exile 1, so movement speed is a little bit more important. So maybe during clearing, mobility is pretty nice, but obviously during bossing you want different support gems. I'm not sure how worthwhile this will be, but we'll take a look in PoE. Maybe we'll do some testing when it releases, and then maybe we find out that's actually quite useful. So next is momentum. It says, well, after moving at least 2 meters during a single use of a supported skill, the rest of that skill deals 40% more damage, and teleporting does not work. There's a attack skill, shield charge, where you move and then deal damage at the end. So that's definitely something that where momentum definitely works if you want to deal more damage with your shield charge, because you will move at least 2 meters with shield charge most likely. Obviously, there might be more skills in the future, but that's something that I would think about is one of the only ones you definitely want to use with momentum if you want your shield dart to actually deal damage. Then we have a quite simple one, which is more duration. It just simply increases your skill's duration. So let's say you want a curse on a character, or you have a buff that grants the buff, like a war cry, then you might want to use more duration to increase that. Keep in mind, unlike in PoE 1, you can only support one skill with this more duration. You can only use one more duration in your whole build. So you have to check out which ones you have. And for example, if the aura grants a temporary buff, you might not want to use more duration on the aura because that will reserve more spirit. So just be careful about that. Next, we have multiple charges. So this just grants grants extra chance to grant an additional charge if you use a skill that would generate charges. So this like power charge, endurance charge, frenzy charge. There's a new thing about these charges, or because right, like in PoE 1 they give pretty nice buffs. In PoE 2, charges don't do anything unless they're only there to be consumed by skills like Flicker Strike, for example, which takes power charges. It consumes all your power charges, and then attacks more depending on how many power charges you consumed. That's kind of the deal with charges now. So multiple charges really needs like you really need to put it in a build where it needs that extra charge generation, where it's pretty handy to do, for example, in a Flicker Strike build where you want to Flicker Strike as much as possible, but you can't do it all the time because you cannot gain charges during Flicker Strike. So multiple charges might allow you to gain your maximum power charge as fast as possible with your secondary skill, and then you can Flicker Strike again after that. So multiple charge might be useful in that build, but otherwise is not that useful. Then we have multiple poisons. So this supports any poison build I would use it for. That shortens the duration of the poison, but allows the poison to deal an additional poison because in like how this works in PoE 2 you can only have one poison stack. You can't have like a million poison like in Lost Epoch, for example. But you can poison an additional time, and then the less duration doesn't matter at all if your main skill just applies poisons all the time, right? But the extra like poison an additional time just increases the damage by a shit ton. So multiple poison seems really good, and it's definitely a must-have in your main damage skill if you're a poison build. Especially because a lot of like the increased damage over time builds Um, a lot of those builds are like a lot of increased damage over time. Damage support gems are always say like non-ailment damage, and poison isn't ailment damage, right? So those aren't useful. So you might have enough space for multiple poisons anyways, but multiple poisons is like one of your best support gems, so you will always try to fit that into your main skill. As far as if this remains the same, obviously. Then we got multiple projectiles, one of the classics, right? So it's costs the supported skill to deal less damage and has less attack and cast speed, but it allows the skill to fire 2 additional projectiles. That is totally fine, right? This is like if you put it on your you can either put like on like, your clearing skill where you need more projectiles to attack more, like kill more monsters at the same time, or you can like put it on a shotgunning skill that deals like just like 100% more damage if it has one more projectile, right? So then multiple projectiles just does a lot of more damage, then that's 20% less damage and 20% less attack speed and cast speed to take away from the DPS of your skill. So this obviously depends on what skill you have, and multiple projectiles like grenades, for example, or crossbow bolts are always nice to have. Then we got multiple traps. So this allows the supported skill to deal like to throw more traps. So it's basically like multiple projectiles. However, for this one, it deals 75% less damage, but it does like can allow like 3 additional traps. So, um, yeah, I think 75% less damage is way too much. It just nukes your whole build, so you would need to deal a lot of damage to make up for that. Maybe it's more for the support traps, right? If you're not that much of a trap build, or you put this on like a secondary trap that triggers curses or whatever, maybe then multiple traps is good. But so far, I don't think we've really seen a good trap skill or any trap skill at all yet. So not sure where to put this one for now. Next, we got neural overload. This is for lightning skills. So the idea is, yeah, when you hit um, enemies with this skill, then yeah you trigger the prime for electrocution, and and then like hitting that enemy will electrocute them, right? So uh, yeah, this is a new like ailment, like electrocutes a new ailment, so we don't really know what we can do with that. But so far, yeah, so far it could be really good, or it could be, or it could be completely useless. So like, we don't really know yet. But like electrocute primed enemies on hit, so you have to prime them first, right? So you need to prime them first with like a like a, not your secondary skill, but like a third skill. Then this skill electrocutes them, and your main skill uses that electrocution to deal more damage, for example. If electrocute works that way, we don't know yet for sure. Right, next is overcharge. So this makes it shocks more effective, but makes it last for a shorter duration. So this is just like the other ailment gems we already talked about, where if you can shock like if you can shock them for enough times that the duration doesn't matter, then this increased effect is insane, right? For your build, that's really good. You definitely have to use this. If you can't shock enough, then this duration makes it not worth it that the shock has increased effect. So that's kind of your thing to think about. Can I apply this shock that I use with my skill enough that overcharge becomes worth it? If it is, then you should definitely use overcharge. Next one is overpower. So the hits with this skill cost like 80% more stim buildup. That sounds like a great number, right? That's really good. This is one of those skills that allow you to like a secondary skill, allow you to stun enemies, or allow you if you put it on your main skill, if your build is really around stunning with your main skill, because then it deals more damage, then you just put it on your main skill, obviously. So yeah, this is something that you definitely need to look at if stun becomes more like more of a main build idea than it is in PoE 1. And from the gameplay we saw and from what other content creators have already thought about maybe doing, then it definitely looks that way. That this might be one of the good support gems. It also makes bossing much easier, right? If they're stunned more times. So it might also be really good in the early game to have on your main skill if you can fit it and the other support gems don't have way too much more damage multipliers, right? Um, Next one we have perpetual charge. So this says support skill has 35% chance to not remove charges but still count as consuming them. So this is really good for those like flicker strike, for example. If there's not an ability to regain your power charge almost instantly right after using the flicker strike, this allows you to maybe use flicker strike twice in a row and then get your charges back after a while, and then use flicker strike again. Like maybe increases your DPS in like a minute wise, right? So not like in a second, it doesn't change anything because you only use that one flicker strike, but like in a minute of like or like in a longer fight, it allows you to use flicker strike more often. So in that case, perpetual charge is useful. If your build can get those charges as fast as possible anyways, then you don't need this support gem. So we don't know yet how easy you can get charges. And that might very much rely on the uniques in the game or the uniques in the game or and the battle tree obviously or your ascendancies. Then we got a pretty simple one again, physical mastery. So this one just grants +1 level to support its physical skills. Yeah, we don't know quite yet how important that is or how much extra damage that puts up. It's interesting that the support requirement is +5 int for physical mastery. If this is not wrong, that's quite interesting. So you need to actually think about getting some int at least on your strength character. But yeah, quite interesting to see that. But yeah, the likelihood that you put this on your main skill might not be super high, but if you're a physical damage build, you probably have multiple physical skills, so there will always be one thing you can put it on, most likely, in your build. All right, next we have Pierce. This causes the projectiles from your supported skill to pierce, but they deal less damage after they have pierced an enemy. So yeah, this requires this is good for certain skills and completely useless for other projectile skills. It really depends on what we can play around with our attack skill. So we don't really know yet how we can use this. This is obviously more of a clearing skill, unless we can abuse pierce. For example, if you can pierce a monster, then it bounces off a wall and goes back into that monster. Sure, it deals 30% less damage, but that projectile basically hit that monster twice, right? So then it's still more damage as if you haven't used the peer support gem. So that kind of depends on what we can build around with. It also depends on the uniques and the other skills, obviously. Right, next is pin. I can't really judge this skill gem because we have no clue what pinning does, except for the fact that this gem makes it so that support skills cannot cause stun buildup, which is actively bad because stunning is good. So it really depends on how good pinning is, right? Because stunning right now seems pretty good. So yeah, who knows? Can't really judge that. Next, we got Poison Chance. So this grants support skills 60% chance to poison on hit. So yeah, we kind of want like our main damaging skill if we our poison build to have 100% chance. If we need poison chance to get that 100% chance to poison, then we need to use poison chance, even though this one doesn't improve the damage, right? But yeah, we don't really know how we can use this. However, on a secondary skill, you can like abuse something like this enemy is poisoned, so you deal more damage with your other skills. Then you definitely want poison chance on that secondary or support skill. Next, we got another a skill that adds to your buff or adds to your aura, and that is precision, which increases your accuracy rating while support skills active. So you can use this if you're not accuracy capped or if you're stacking accuracy. You can just put this on one of your auras, and then the spirit cost goes up a little bit, but it's still like it's basically an extra aura, but it's a support gem instead of an active gem, so that's pretty good. As long as you need accuracy, obviously. If you don't need accuracy, and then you don't use precision. Next is pulverize. So this supports melee attack skills. It makes them slower, like you have 20% less AoE. Sorry, you have 20% increased AoE, but you have 15% less attack speed. But more importantly, you have 20% more melee damage. But this is only for area skills, you see, because it's 20% more melee area damage. Interesting that's not on here as a category. But so yeah, you need it needs to be on an area skill, so like a bigger slam, not a pure one person melee, one enemy melee skill. But yeah, 20% more melee damage. If that is enough, if there's not better numbers, then you definitely want to use both rights, even though 50% less attack speed is not that great. But let's say if you use it on like a one-off skill that you use like one in every few seconds just to apply a big hit. Let's say you use your main skill to try to stun a boss, then you use like a secondary, like damaging one-off skill like Pulverize. Put that Pulverize on, it doesn't really matter, then it has less attack speed, and then maybe the 20% more melee damage, area damage is enough. Next is Rage. So this gives us 3 Rage on melee hit. Let's say if Rage does the same thing as in PoE 1, so it gives us extra boosts, it just makes us deal more damage, then it's nice, but it's probably better to gain a Rage on melee hit on the tree, because we've already seen ways to get it on tree, and I'm pretty sure I've seen it on a jewel, like gain 1 Rage on melee hit, which is most of the time enough to just get that starting a little bit, because as long as you gain Rage constantly, you won't lose it. So yeah, getting it on a jewel is probably better than getting it on the support gem. All right, next we got Raged Forged. So this is a good after you've built up Rage, either through the Rage support gem or through other ways. This supported skill can consume 10 Rage to deal 35% more damage. 35% more damage is definitely a very good bonus. So I would say that Rage Forged is definitely something you want to try to use if you're if you can either gain rage quite quickly. For example, if your build hits a lot, you can get that 10 hit rage very fast if you gain 1 rage or 2 rage on melee hit, or if you like gain rage slowly, but you use this on a skill that you use once every 10 seconds or whatever to deal a lot of damage on one hit, then it's also pretty nice. You can also gain rage through Raging Cry, which is the next one, which supports War Cries and grants you 4 rage per 5 power of enemies in range. So how that works is you gain more power if there are more enemies, or if the let's say if it's a big or multiple big unique enemies, then you get more power as well. Next one is ranged combat. This supports attacks and causes them to deal more damage the further you are away until you get to 3.5 meters, and then it doesn't grab any bonus. So this is for pretty far ranged attacks, how far you can go, at least till 7 meters, the more damage you deal. So if you think about, can my build go that far? There will be a radius on PoE Wiki for sure. There's probably currently one for PoE 1, and the area will be the same, so you can kind of see how much 7 meters is. If you think you can do that while playing, if you see, okay, yeah, I can definitely easily get to that 7 meters, then 35% more attack damage is definitely worth it, and you should definitely try it in your build. Next, we have reduced cooldown. Well, this is quite easy. It just reduces the cooldown, like it decreases the cooldown recovery rate of one of your skills. So if you have a skill on a cooldown that you really want to use as fast as possible, then you can just use reduced cooldown on that skill. Most of the time, a skill like that is not something you have a main skill. Not something you really want super many like damaging supports on it. So reduced cooldown can be quite a good fit. It really depends on how easy it is to get cooldown recovery rate on your gear and on the tree. If it's harder to get, then this support gem is better. If it's easier to get, then the support gem's value obviously decreases. All right, so I'll continue with reload speed. So reload speed is, yeah, it just increases the speed of your reload. Yeah, so this really depends. Like increased reload speed is really important on your crossbow, obviously. But yeah, it really depends on whether this 100% matters in the grand scheme of things. So let's say if you get on gear like 500% increased crossbow reload speed, or the reload speed decreases by level or something, then reload speed matters less. If reload speed keeps like being really important even until the end game, then the support gem is obviously completely necessary. I think reload speed is on that spot where it's either used in all builds for like the main one you need to reload often, or used in zero builds at all. And then, like, except for maybe one or something. So we kind of need to wait how important reload speed is going to be. Next one is Ritualistic Curse. So this supports curse skills, causing them to cover a large area, but it has a reduced like delay. So what that matters, like what that does, like for Path of Exile 1, curses just apply instantly after you cast them, but for Path of Exile 2, curses, how they work is you act like you use your curse skill, then after a certain time, that after a certain time the curse actually takes effect. So yeah, I think this is pure trash, right? Because I think curses having that delay is more like you want that delay to be as short as possible to have a greater uptime of your curses. So that I would say that's way more important than that increased AoE effect. So yeah, unless there's a different way of using this, I would say do not use this, right? That delay, unless you can bypass the delay somehow and make like the downside stop mattering, then I would not use this. Um, so Rupture, this grants your supported skills to aggravate bleeding when you hit heavily stunned enemies. So the the stun like the enemies already have to be stunned or heavy stunned even. So the way you do that is you do that with a different skill most likely, and then you use Rupture on your like main bleeding. Um, like your main bleeding skill, and then you attack, and then you cost the aggravated bleeding, making them take more damage. Yeah, pretty simple. Next one is Ruthless. So for this one, it says every fifth use of this attack causes 500% more stun buildup. So this requires your attack to kind of like you have to have a good good enough attack speed for this to matter at all, because else every fifth attack takes a longer time, makes Ruthless less useful, and doesn't warrant it as a slot in your support gem, right? In your support gem slots. But if you can attack fast enough, then that more stun buildup might actually matter. Stun seems to be really good for now, so maybe Ruthless is worth it, but it might also just not be that worth it. We don't really know yet. That kind of depends on how fast, how you can use this with an attack that has to be strong enough to actually cause like 500% more buildup is nice, but 500% of one is not that great, right? 500% of one is only 5, while 500% of 50 is much more, right? So, or 500% of all your damage, like if you deal like 1,000 damage per hit versus like 10 damage per hit, you attack more fast. So yeah, you really need to check on if your build can actually use Ruthless enough. Next one we have Searing Flame. This is on hit, so this makes you deal less damage with hits, but it increases the damage of your ignite by a lot. So just like in the last video where I talked about a similar one with poison, the way dots work is you hit an enemy, then they take your the dot damage depends on how much that hit dealt them, right? So let's say you did 50 damage or with one hit, or 1,000 damage with the other hit. The dot, so the ignite damage is going to be much higher due to that, because of that 1,000 damage hit than the 50 damage hit. So you really need to check if your ignite build does enough damage with the hits to actually deal good enough ignites. So the 75% more effective ignite is not 75% more damage, because your 25% less damage from hits actually apply as well to that ignite damage, but it's still going to be a very high more damage node like support on your damaging skill. So Searing Flame will definitely be used on basically all ignite builds as long as you apply it with that skill enough. All right, Second Wind is another support gem. This allows your cooldown skills to be used twice, um, or you have like two uses, just like Flame Dash in Path of Exile 1, but the cooldown recovery is much lower. This is most often still useful because you want to use it like twice in a row or something. You want twice in a short concession, or yeah, it's most of the time useful because it's 50% less cooldown recovery rate, not 100% less. So yeah, I would say it's still good enough, right? If you have a cooldown recovery or a cooldown skill. Shock chance is next. This is very simple. It just gives 20% chance to shock. We're not completely sure on how easy it is with like spells to shock. Um, so maybe you want to use this on a spell that has a higher chance to shock, and then you can put this on there. If that works together, if it just doesn't give a 20% chance to shock again or something. But yeah, 20% seems like a really low number for PvE1 levels, right? That seems like completely worthless. So there has to be some way that GG made this that shocking is much harder, right? Because else the shock chance gem seems completely useless. Um, Next, we got a shock proliferation. So when you finally shock something with your hit, it doesn't only shock that one enemy, but it has a 50% chance to proliferate to other enemies. So if you shock through a one target skill, then it can proliferate and shock other enemies, and then cause it to cause them to also deal get more damage, right? Get dealt more damage because they're shocked. So this is another clearing skill. It's a little bit worse than proliferation for ignites or poison, for example, because they actually deal damage, and you want to proliferate because you want to deal more damage to monsters with your shocks, or you want to deal damage to other monsters with your shocks. With your dots and shock proliferation, if your build is good enough where you can just clear packs very fast, you don't need the proliferation, right? So for shock, it's probably less useful than for the damaging ailments. Next, we got Shock Siphon. So whenever you kill a shocked enemy with the skill this supports, you get 4% of your energy shield back. Um, yeah, I'm not completely sure about this, but there's another defensive layer, especially for mapping. And let's say if you're doing Breach or Delirium, and you get hit a lot, then that extra recovery is nice. And if you can shock basically every monster you can kill very easily, then Shock Siphon is pretty nice to get on your main skill. Otherwise, it might be less useful because it obviously doesn't grant damage to your um, it doesn't grant damage to your main skill or your clearing skill. So if you don't need more damage, then having this like extra defensive layer is pretty nice. But sometimes you just need 5 damaging support, so you might not be able to use this. Next is slower projectiles. So this grants instead of faster projectiles, it grants less projectile speed. So in Path of Exile 1, I used this um, with Ice Nova. With the Ice Nova bit, Frostbolt Ice Nova, it was nice to have the Frostbolt have less projectile speed, so you can affect the same monster with the same Frostbolt and the same Ice Nova on that same Frostbolt more often. So there is definitely some helpfulness with slower projectiles. So don't regard this as a completely useless support gem. There are definitely going to be uses for this one. Then we got Soul Drain. So whenever you kill an enemy, now you recover 12% of mana in over 4 seconds. This does require both this support gem and a way to call that with that attack. If you don't get it, for example, through the mercenary ascendancy, the witch hunter ascendancy, sorry, of the mercenary, which grants you just culling strike in general. If you have to use culling strike, for example, as another support gem, then you've wasted basically two support gems on that skill. So that's probably not worth it, especially because it doesn't increase your damage, right? And most of the time, like if you're thinking in PoE1 terms, you definitely want 5 damaging support gems. So Soul Drain, probably not gonna be it. Now we have another Path of Exile Classic, which is Spell Echo. So it just echoes your spells. They have less cast speed, but they do grant more AoE, which is interesting. That's cool that supported skills, like the echoes from the supported skills, have more AoE. That's new. I think I'm pretty sure that's not in PoE1, as far as I know. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, the 30% less cast speed is worth it because you basically cast them again. Obviously, it's kind of like an extra drawback, and you can just gain that cast speed back, right, through your gear, or you have to try to get as much cast speed so you can abuse that spell echo more often, right? So, but yeah, spell echo is used in almost every spell, in almost every spell build. So that's going to be really used often. Next we have Splinter. So the hits that break armor. This causes breaking armor. So this is a way, like let's say you have a secondary skill. In part one, I talked a lot about this, where you have your primary skill that deals a lot of damage to broken, like enemies with broken armors. Then you have a secondary skill that breaks armors, and this is a way you can cause your secondary skill to break that armor faster, right? Break more armor or break armor in general, and then support that with more support gems so you can break armor faster and then move on to your main skill to deal a lot of damage. So nice one. Right, Stomping Ground's a new one. This triggers a shockwave whenever you take a step while you are using a supported skill. Note that it supports travel skills, so yeah, you need to use a travel skill and then it triggers something. I'm not sure how many travel skills there are at the moment. There are obviously less travel skills than there were in PoE1, so you need to think about that. I'm not complete like this damage has to be really high for it to matter, or it just needs like the travel skills just need to have like no other support gems, so just put this one in it anyways because why not? As long as it's a attack travel skill naturally. Um, Maybe with when Cyclone comes, because Cyclone is currently not a skill. When Cyclone comes, which is an attack, which might be a travel skill, and does physical damage, right? So then, and Shockwave will do physical damage as well, else the physical attack wouldn't be there. Then you deal, like, you have more Shockwaves while you use Cyclone. So for that, it might be pretty good, but right now I don't think that one exists. Well, Cyclone doesn't exist yet, and I'm not completely sure there is actually a skill you really want Stomping Ground to use for at the moment. Next we have Stormfire. So this grants shocks from the supported skill that we use. So this is probably not going to be a main skill support gem, but it says that shocks from that skill do not expire on ignite enemies. So this is for builds that can both shock and ignite. But again, this is useless on builds that can shock often enough that the duration doesn't matter. But on builds that shock and not shock enough or often enough for duration to do matter, then this is obviously very nice if they can also ignite. If you if you can ignite very easily but not shock very easily, and you can shock using this skill, and the best thing would be if you can ignite and shock with this skill, that would be very nice. Otherwise, you can maybe ignite through your main damage skill or your ignite build, and shock matters for you. Then obviously Stormfire can be used nicely in your build. Next is Swift Affliction. So this supports your damage over time, but more importantly, non-ailment damage over time. So be careful about that, so it doesn't support Ignite, for example. but it does reduce the duration of the supported skill. So let's say you have Essence Drain, for example. I'm just using Essence Drain for all of these, and yeah, you use that in your Swift Affliction, then the duration of your dot is lower, but you deal so much more damage. As long as you can apply that dot often enough, and most of the time you could do so, then Swift Affliction is obviously very nice. Next, we have Unbreakable, which grants 200% more stun threshold while you are using a supported skill. So this is again something like Cyclone, which you were using a lot of the time, and you don't want to be stunned while using Cyclone. You want Unbreakable. Otherwise, yeah, it really depends on how important defense against stun is. Stuns are. I'm not sure it's gonna be that great if it has to be really important to be good against stuns for Unbreakable to be actually useful, or you need to have a build that is using supported skills a lot, where you basically don't need to sacrifice time to damage your enemies while still having higher threshold because of the Unbreakable support gem. So it kind of depends on your build, but most of the time I don't think this is going to be used very often. So next we use Unleash. So this is for like when you yeah, this is like in Path of Exile 1, where yes, you support your skill, and then when you use it, you gain a seal when you cast it, and then after you unseal the cast, you just um, yeah, you just reoccur them, right? So this is like you kind of change your spell. If you played Best Function 1, you know what it does. I can't really explain it that well because I never used it myself in Battle of Exile 1, but um, Unleash is quite like niche, and it will probably remain niche in Path of Exile 2. I'm pretty sure I'm just never gonna use the support ever in the game unless it becomes a meta build, right? Next is Vitality. So just like Clarity, it's now a support gem and not an active gem, and it like goes on your aura, and it allows you to regen life while the aura is active, or you can put it on another skill that grants you a buff. As long as it's a persistent buff, which most of the time will just be an aura, right? This just grants you like a regen, which in the early acts, or just probably also in Act 4, 5, or in Act 4, 5, and 6, and right now that obviously is just Cruel Act 1, Cruel Act 2, Cruel Act 3. Then Vitality is pretty important because there's a lot less life regeneration or life leech and stuff like that. So you kind of want something like Vitality. So if you can get it, then it's probably pretty nice to have. Maybe later in the game it's less important. Next we have volley. So this is kind of like multiple projectiles, but the like it fires two additional projectiles, and it fires projectiles from up to 4 points on each side of you. So this is kind of like multiple projectiles, but it's a different support gem, so you can use both. And this one also reduces the damage, but as long as you can effectively hit with those additional projectiles, both from the volley and those like two additional projectiles, then that is very good, right? So um, yeah, so you volley, right? You follow from your north, south, west. Uh, and east. So yeah, if you can actively use those projectiles well, your build and volley is just more damage, obviously. So then you can use it well, and otherwise you just don't use it at all. Wed or weapon elemental damage is also PoE classic. Just grants you more weapon elemental damage. So that's elemental damage with attacks that use your weapon, or the elemental damage on your weapon, right? So yeah, that's quite simple for people that played PoE. For PoE, yeah, people that play PoE 1. Otherwise, it's even for those that didn't. Weapon elemental damage is just the damage on your weapon, the elemental weapon damage. Yeah, pretty easy, right? Wildfire is next. So this is like this is proliv for your ignites. So yeah, but this is kind of like proliv for your ignites, but not completely, right? Because your enemies need to stay within each other for the 2 seconds. That's not always that easy because you want to kill your enemies within 2 seconds if you can. So not sure how that is that useful in the late game, in end game, but maybe it's useful enough to still use it for bossing. Like most of the time, you don't have other enemies that you want to ignite that stay within each other for the 2 seconds, unless they're like it's a boss that has two bosses at the same time, which do exist, I think. And then we have only four left. We have a wild shard next, so this is once revealed for um, I think it was either revealed or someone else used it in one of the videos showing their class. But this grants like support skill to have 20% chance to fire 8% additional projectiles in your circle. This is really cool. I think this is definitely gonna be played. People are gonna try this out. How good this will be, I'm not completely sure, but it's something cool, something you really want to try anyways, and I'm definitely gonna try it if I play a build that has those that can definitely take use of those 8 additional projectiles. Obviously for clearing it's really good, but for bosses you might need some way to actively use it. Next we got Wind Wave. Yeah, this really doesn't say us anything. We don't know what Wind Wave does. Like it triggers Wind Wave when you're getting stunned, but you don't want to get stunned. So you already are trying not to get stunned. So unless this has like a massive a massive defensive um, benefit to you, and you use this skill enough, and so you get stunned while using the skill, and the wind wave is a good trigger. So this requires a lot of ifs, and as long as one of those ifs are not met, which is quite likely, wind wave is probably a useless support gem. Next is window of opportunity. So this supports channeling skills that have special reflect when they are released with perfect timing. So we don't really know that yet, but there will definitely be some on release or maybe very quickly after, so that this support gem is useful. Probably on release, otherwise they wouldn't have released this support gem at all. But yeah, it deals more damage if they're released on a perfect timing window. But the chance, like the time you get to get that perfect timing window is lower. So yeah, we don't really know what this does yet. So like we don't have a perfect timing window skill yet. Like we haven't had the opportunity to really see that skill yet correctly. But if you can use this, if you're skilled enough to use this good enough on your skill, then definitely use it because 50% more damage, 50% more damage. And finally, it's a withered touch. So this, yeah, supports any skill that hits enemies, and it gives them a chance to wither. So yeah, the support skill itself deals 50% less damage. So definitely do not use this on on your main spell. But withered is another like debuff on your enemies to make your other spells deal more damage. This is like something you would put on a totem, for example, that constantly hits your enemy, like a boss, for example, with chaos damage, and then it takes more chaos damage from your main skill. So you're definitely using this if you have a way to constantly trigger this, or at least trigger this every 4 seconds, because that's how long it lasts. All right, guys, those were all the support gems and their uses. Obviously, not everything is known yet, so there's not a complete guide to every support gem. But I hope then this video helps for when you do play on, I hope, the December the 6th, to help you like make better choices, or maybe even already think about your build before December 6th. Yeah, let me know what you thought about this video. If you have other ideas or comments, please let me know. And if you liked the video, then please like the video. Yeah, by giving it a like, and uh, please subscribe. All right, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.